Good morning and welcome to this webinar on consumer and prosumer perspectives on energy flexibility, organized by the iFLEX project. My name is Louise Riley, and I would like to give a warm welcome to our speakers today, who all represent the consumer interest. We have from the Slovene Consumers Association, ZPS, who is also a partner in the iFLEX project. We have Roman Tomasic and Barbara Prink. Welcome to you. And then we have special guest Dimitri Verne from the European Consumer Organization, BEUC. With us is also Jesper Testrup from INJET, who will be managing any questions that you might put forward during the presentations. So we invite you to write the questions and add them to the question option that you have in the toolbar, probably on your right, and then press send, and we will then collect your questions at the end and put them forward to the speakers. I should also add that this webinar is being recorded and made available on demand on the iFLEX website after this webinar. So let's go to the agenda. So first, Roman will introduce the iFLEX project and its approach to consumer involvement in the development of energy flexibility solutions. His presentation is followed by a presentation from Barbara on the main outcomes from some of the engagement activities that have been conducted in Slovenia. And Slovenia is one of the pilot countries in iFLEX. Finally, Dimitri will talk about consumer trends in Europe within the energy field, and in particular within the concepts of energy flexibility and demand response. And after the presentation, we'll have a session on the Q&A, a Q&A session, where we will ask the questions that have been collected during the presentation. So again, if you have any questions, add them as text in the text box you'll find under the question option in the toolbar, and we will present them to the speakers. And now I would like to give the word to Roman on the iFLEX project and the user engagement approach within the project. The floor is yours, Roman.
Thanks, Luis. Hello from my side. I'm Roman Tomasic from ZPS, partner at iFLEX project. So first, few words about the iFLEX project itself. The aim of the iFLEX project is to make it easy and attractive for energy consumers to engage in flexibility services in which they adjust their energy consumption in response to price signals, flexibility requests, or other incentives coming from the energy system. To enable the consumer to manage flexibility easily, iFLEX is developing an intelligent iFLEX assistant. iFLEX assistant, this is the word you will hear today a few times. So the iFLEX assistant handles all the complexity of the system interactions on behalf of the consumer. For the consumer, iFLEX assistant is actually just a simple mobile app, but in the background, there are modern digital systems connecting homes and grids. Okay, so the iFLEX solution was designed, or actually we are still designing it and validating for 3 pilot regions and tested with the pilot users. Actually, we are testing and validating the solution right now. With various pilot regions, we aim to show the versatility of the iFLEX solution. So we have 3 pilot sites, actually Finland, Slovenia, and Greece. Okay. And now a few words about designing iFLEX solution with consumers. Since we are developing the solution for consumers, we want to design a solution with consumers, of course, or in other words, this is co-creation. To approach and engage consumers, we introduced an iFLEX pilot user journey, as you see it on the slides, where we took care of pilot consumers becoming from consumers actually our pilot users. The journey has 8 steps, as you see on slides, from recruiting, onboarding, and most important, co-creation, where is the heart of designing the iFLEX solution with consumers. There are 3 areas actually where the co-creation took part. First one is business models, so how things work, what transactions are going on. Then incentives mechanisms, how the consumers are rewarded, what rewards they can expect, and iFLEX mobile application itself. With that approach, with that co-creation approach, we gained significant benefits compared to classical development lifecycle. For example, pilot users were more satisfied since they contributed with their ideas. We got early feedback if something was not okay. And actually what's most important, pilot users got the sense of ownership for this solution. So compared to the classical development lifecycle, I think we benefit here most. Okay. Sorry. So now moving, so these are a few words about the iFLEX project itself. And now we're moving to our survey about flexible energy consumption and iFLEX among Slovenian consumers. Handing over to Barbara. Barbara, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. Just wait till I get over the control. Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Primc from Slovene Consumers Association. As part of the iFLEX project, we wanted to check consumer response to flexible energy consumption and the use of iFLEX Assistant that Roman was talking about. The main objective was to study how consumers react to services related to the optimization of electricity consumption. For that purpose, we have selected 2 target groups of consumers: knowledgeable amateurs and self-sufficient. Knowledgeable amateurs are consumers who play a key role in their household's electricity decisions, and self-sufficient are consumers who meet the criteria for the expert group and who already have a heat pump or solar panels in their households. The research focused on 3 main objectives, which are consumption habits, trends, and concept validation. The aim of the first objective was to understand which energy products consumers use for heating, how they heat, what is their attitude towards electricity consumption. And with the second objective, we wanted to check their understanding of the concept of renewable sources, demand response services, and also energy flexibility. And with the aim of the third objective was to check and understand how well the iFLEX Assistant is accepted among the target groups, what are the first impressions, positive and negative characteristics of the concept, and of course we wanted to check if the participants are willing to use the iFLEX Assistant. A few words about the methodology. We used qualitative data analysis and conducted 4 focus groups with a total of 29 participants. They were divided into two categories, as mentioned before, knowledgeable amateurs and self-sufficient. Focus groups were held in two largest Slovenian cities, in Ljubljana and Maribor. And in this way, we wanted to ensure a regional diversity of views and also to attract participants from both the urban and rural areas. One of the tasks for participants was to write down what they associate with the terms renewable energy sources, demand response, and energy flexibility. Renewables were most frequently associated with alternative energy sources such as wind, water, sun, that means solar energy, and also with the devices that convert them into electricity. Energy flexibility was most often associated with the individual adaptation of user habits and behavioral patterns, the rationalization of electricity consumption, the use of energy-saving appliances, and the use of different energy sources. The notion of demand response was most frequently used to refer to energy-saving consumption, the use of energy-saving appliances, and also behavioral change. We found that energy flexibility and demand response turned out to be notably lesser known concepts. Participants made fewer association with them than with renewables. Then we also observed some differences between the two groups, the knowledgeable amateurs and self-sufficient. The knowledgeable amateurs most often pointed to sun as the central association for all concepts, while the self-sufficient cited several different alternative energy sources and also different ways, different devices and means of converting energy into power. Knowledgeable amateurs, on the other hand, additionally highlighted associations related to adjustments in their own electricity use behavior, which was significantly less emphasized by the self-sufficient group. We found that participants lacked knowledge of flexibility and demand response. They mostly associate the two concepts with saving electricity, reducing the cost of bills, and buying energy-saving appliances. Therefore, it is essential to raise their awareness of both concepts. The reason for this can be found in the fact that consumers consider electricity sector as category of basic supply, regarding it as a utility. So they are very passive and disengaged, thinking of the subject only in the terms of the cost of their monthly bills. Some participants are aware of the importance of adapting their energy consumption for environmental reasons, but their awareness remains at a declarative level, which means they do not turn their behavior into practice. For example, most of them don't understand why they should adjust their energy consumption to the times of day when more renewable energy is available, as they have no experience of grid congestion or insufficient power quality. They don't even recognize these two reasons as an argument for adjusting their consumption. Our participants identified themselves as active electricity consumers and they demonstrate their active behavior in their households in several ways. For example, by choosing energy-saving appliances, almost all are paying attention to energy label when buying new appliances. Then by switching to LED bulbs, monitoring lower and higher tariffs, use of smart sockets, optimizing heating consumption tracking. Half of them believe they could still improve their habits. And for participants who already have a heat pump or solar power plant installed, there is less of a need for further adjustment and optimization of consumption. The third objective of this research was the iFLEX concept validation. And the concept was presented to the participants in the form of a leaflet you can see on the screen. Text is written in a simple, clear, and understandable, interesting way, so they could easily understand it. And regarding the results, we found that most participants are interested in the service, but only if it is free of charge and without installation costs. The decision to use it also to use the iFLEX assistant also depends on the investment costs, the installation costs, the commitment required, and the expected savings. For the participants, expected savings should be at least 15 to 20% of monthly bill. If the investment costs are acceptable for some participants, which they mentioned up to 100 euros or maximum 200 euros, about half of the participants would use the service. However, they are reluctant to pay, and only the most dedicated individuals, these are the self-suppliers, are especially those who already use smart devices to monitor their energy consumption. So these participants would be willing to pay for iFLEX assistant. As for the participants with lower consumption and those living in multi-apartment buildings, they would be less inclined to use such an assistant because they are feared they would never get a return on their investment. Benefits of iFLEX assistants were also presented to the participants, also on the leaflet, and most participants find it useful to be able to monitor their electricity consumption and also to receive advice on how to take advantage of lower tariffs. So they highlighted two main advantages. One is savings on bill, and the second is efficient use of electricity and easing of everyday life. Participants also identified main weaknesses and obstacles of iFLEX assistants. First of all, they highlighted lack of information on the initial investment costs, the necessary interventions in the electrical installation, and also the lack of clarity on the need to purchase smart devices like smart meter, smart sockets. They identified smartphone app as the best form of consumption monitoring, as they are all used to and skilled in the general use of smartphones. But they weren't concerned about the possibility of discrimination against the elderly and also against the socially vulnerable people who are not skilled in these new technologies. They were concerned also about the usefulness of the app and the rationale for its existence. Like they were saying, maybe it's just another app among many on the market. Most participants are not willing to drastically change their existing behavioral habits, and some of them do not feel comfortable sharing data about their everyday habits. They also expressed concerns about security and privacy. Based on their answers, through different techniques, we prepared recommendations for iFLEX Assistant. From the technical point of view, it should provide better information on initial costs and necessary interventions during installations. Then the second is to define in more detail whether or not additional smart devices are needed. And the third recommendation is that the assistant should not automatically switch off devices, but it should only inform about switch off. Regarding application, we should emphasize the practical usefulness of the app and data security and privacy. And regarding incentives, the main conclusion is that participants will only test iFLEX Assistant or use iFLEX Assistant if they know in advance what savings they will make on their bill and when the full cost of their investment will be recovered. And also the savings with iFLEX Assistant should be clearly communicated. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman and Barbara, for your presentations. We now would like to welcome Dimitri from the European Consumer Organization, BEUC, who will enlighten us on consumer trends within the energy field and within demand response. And the floor is yours, Dimitri.
Thank you, Louise, and thanks everyone for this interesting exchange. So taking over from Barbara, the title is quite broad, but and it's quite an agenda, but I focus obviously on the conditions to make dynamic prices, demand side response, demand side flexibility available, attractive, convenient, and secure, and shed light, of course, on the legislative developments and the EU debates around this issue. But maybe first, as a scene setter, why is it that we need actually demand side flexibility first? Why do we need people to optimize their energy consumption in the next, already now, and this will increasingly be the case in the next few years? I've put this graph. It comes from the European Commission's impact assessment. You know, they've published a few last week or 2 weeks ago, or last month, sorry, their new proposal for a 2040 climate target. And in the impact assessment accompanying this communication, there is this interesting graph about what is expected in terms of power generation in future years. And this is quite telling, right? Whatever the scenario, whether more ambitious, less ambitious, etc., we know that renewable energy, electricity generation will grow exponentially over the next few years. And already in the current decade, we'll almost do more than doubling of renewable energy electricity generation. In parallel to that, we also have a very strong increase, very significant increase of electricity consumption, because we're electrifying many segments of our economy. The industry is electrifying, of course, but if I mention only, let's say, direct uses which are directly relevant for consumers, for individual households, let's talk about heating. We are in a wave of electrification of heating with many more heat pumps being made available on the market, for instance. We also see a massive increase of battery electric cars. The car industry is on an electrification trend as well. We moved from single digits market share a few years ago to many European countries having now 1/10, 1/5, 1/4 sometimes of new cars being fully electric. So this trend is going to continue in future years. This is a chance because at BEUC and with our members, with ZPS actually and others, we've demonstrated that this electrification trend is not only vital in terms of tackling the climate crisis and breaking away from a fossil fueled system, but it will come with gains for consumers in terms of purchasing power, in terms of comfort, in terms of quality of life. However, this trend comes also with big challenges, and the biggest challenges we have will be that the massive move away from fossil fueled electricity generation to renewable will need to be matched in terms of demand side management. This graph is also quite telling. It shows how this current system is working. In Italy, you see electricity generation and electricity demand being rather matching at all time. And why is that so? It's simply because we have a buffer, which is fossil fueled electricity generation, mostly now gas electricity generation, which can be activated very quickly when there is a peak in demand, and deactivated quite quickly when there is a decrease of demand. So we don't need to think so much about how to manage the grid. When there is a peak in demand, for instance, on a difficult winter day, gas power generation can respond to the demand quite quickly. However, moving to a massively renewable-based energy system, this buffer, this capacity to adjust is not as strong, obviously, and for obvious reasons. Wind is not blowing at the same speed every time in the year, in every day of the year. The sun is shining, obviously, not always and during the day, so it cannot answer, for instance, peak consumption at nighttime. So we know that when moving from this fossil fueled system to a renewable energy based electricity system, our power generation will become much more intermittent, and we'll have to deal with this volatility, let's say, of electricity generation. And here in the graph as well, it's still the Italian energy system, but this time it's a dive into the renewable energy generation. And you see a significant drop, which corresponds, and this is the one we've put with a circle. It's a moment in the day where sun photovoltaic is not available anymore because the night is coming. So this is something which is not unmanageable, but which we need to think about, which policymakers think about, with distribution system operators think about, which energy suppliers think about, and which we as consumer groups also need to think about. How do we replace this fossil fuel electricity generation? There are several options to do that, right? And here we've listed a few of them. Many people are talking about hydrogen power plants, for instance, hydrogen being the replacement for fossil gas. While hydrogen is indeed a key energy carrier and will be a key energy carrier in future years, we also know this is very expensive to produce. This is quite energy inefficient and needs 3 times as much electricity as direct electrification to answer the same needs. So hydrogen, yes, but what we say as consumer groups, and this is quite a scientific consensus. It should be well targeted at those sectors which are difficult to electrify, such as heavy industry. Nuclear is there in many European countries and will continue to play a big role in electricity generation. However, with the massification of electricity needs, we also know that the building of new nuclear power plants will take years, if not decades, to be completed. And we have a very immediate challenge to tackle at the moment. So we cannot say everything will be answered by nuclear. We need to do other things. Batteries are another possibility, and this will be part of the solution because they can store energy. And finally, this is where we come to the topic of today: demand response. Demand response, it's, we argue, of course, all the other solutions are also needed, but demand response is something that is quite easily available. It's not a technological bet, meaning we, for instance, around half of EU households are already equipped with a smart meter, which could help, switching to demand response. It's not rocket science, and it can be associated with strong financial benefits for people. So this is something that we need to put much more emphasis on if we want to succeed in the energy transition. However, demand response is not an easy one either. Why? Because there are a series of barriers which Barbara and Roman to some extent have already kind of addressed with their presentation on iFLEX, and some barriers which I summarize here. We have risks in terms of, or the perception of a risk in terms of will me engaging in demand response being like just putting all my savings on stock exchange, right? And I just risk seeing, like a sudden peak of electricity prices, and then it's a gamble, and I lose, and I pay twice the price I would have paid under normal classical tariffs. There is also a huge lack of clarity, and Barbara said interesting things from the focus group on this, on what are the potential savings? What can I really expect from switching to dynamic prices? And then there are also risks which are perceived or not in terms of privacy and data protection, because it's connected devices. If you go to automation, which is probably the way demand response will work best, risk in terms of cybersecurity. And then there is a whole technical aspect of things which are maybe not that well known for consumers, but it's a question of interoperability. Demand response will work if you make sure that your different appliances, which can play this role of, switching off and on and interacting with the wholesale prices, it will need to receive data signals to be able to do that. And hence, we need to make sure that the devices that we're using are interoperable, and that we're not stuck, and the devices don't communicate with each other. But first thing first, maybe before even coming to these barriers, one of the things that we have to say is that demand response dynamic tariffs should already be there in Europe. They should already be offered to every European consumer. Does not mean that everyone should be on dynamic prices, but in theory, me living in Brussels, I should be able to find an offer with dynamic prices if I wish to. And same for all of you in your different countries. Why is that? Because it's a provision which was adopted 5 years ago in a previous reform of electricity market rules in Europe, and which clearly said that every consumer should have access in Europe to a dynamic prices offer. Is it the case? No. In many European countries, and that's what the graph is showing, but in around more than 10 European countries, people simply don't have any access to this. That's the case for me in Brussels. If I'd like to switch to a dynamic prices tariff, and I'm looking online, no energy provider is offering this, right? So I could have solar panels, I could have an electric car, it's not the case, but I could have a heat pump, also not the case. so I would have the perfectly insulated house. So I would be the best test case for benefiting from dynamic tariffs, but I still couldn't access them because it's simply not offered to me. So what we've been saying is that we first need to implement those rules and make sure that this finally made available to people, because we might not convince 50% of the population, but maybe a few percent would already be being potential clients. Then coming to the next barriers that I've listed, risk of high bills. The difference between dynamic prices and fixed price tariffs or variable tariffs is that dynamic prices, they answer to wholesale prices, right? So they adjust several times per day, or hourly sometimes, to the wholesale markets. So indeed, you could have that concern that, okay, when the market gets crazy, I will pay much more than under a fixed price contract, which seems more guaranteed, clear, and with more safeguards. However, what we see, and we will soon publish a study on this next month, so stay tuned for that, is that price hikes happen, but prices go down much quicker as well. And so, for instance, at the midst of the energy crisis, all suppliers increased by a lot their fixed price tariffs or variable price tariff to factor in the instability of wholesale prices, meaning you were stuck with high prices for quite a long time, while people on dynamic tariffs, when prices went low again, could benefit from the price decrease much earlier. So there is a risk of high bill, but because the system is much more flexible, it also adapts very quickly to decrease in prices. And in general, that means, and we've shown that in the study, that people still benefit from dynamic price tariff, even in a very volatile system, or maybe even more in a volatile system. And what we show also in this study, which I'm teasing a bit, is that as long as you manage your heat pump, meaning you're a household with a heat pump, as long as you manage your heat pump and you make sure that it starts operating, for instance, in the night, when the wind is blowing, or in the middle of the day when the sun is shining, with dynamic prices tariffs, it's always cheaper to switch to a dynamic prices tariff. This is the case in Belgium. So this is quite compelling figures. And another interesting one is that people might think, okay, what about the other devices, washing machine, cooking, lighting, etc., which are less flexible than heat pump or charging of an electric car? Well, what we've shown is that even if you use inflexibly these devices, the price premium is very limited. It's around 40 euros per year, and it's more than well compensated by those appliances which really are expensive to run, meaning heat pump and electric car charging, for instance. Then we come to a very, very important question, and I think this was the core of Barbara's presentation, the question of consumer engagement, the trust, the confidence, the understanding of dynamic prices. And to put it quite bluntly, I think people have no clue about what dynamic prices are, what is demand side response. And we should not blame them for that, because we should not expect consumers to become experts of the electricity markets to engage in something that we want to roll out massively, right? Being a consumer, we often say that at BEUC, should not be a full-time job, right? Because if you need to become a specialist of each consumption area, you won't have enough of a life to do that, right? And looking at even the target audiences that Barbara selected in the project, so knowledgeable amateurs and self-sufficient, they sound as quite reasonably informed target audiences. And even with this knowledgeable amateurs, for instance, you have the problems in terms of confidence, in terms of understanding. Can you imagine for the broader population, those who never check their electricity bill apart from the part where you know what to pay. Those who don't really care about the energy transition, and that's fine. Like this will be completely out of their interest. So the question we need to ask ourselves is not how do we make them getting an interest in a very technical and difficult debate. It should be rather how do we develop an offer that is convenient, easy to understand, that provide the right guarantees, and that enables a massive switch to this kind of tariffs, which are heavily needed for the stability of the energy system. And you've said it as well, Barbara, there is a risk of vulnerabilities, and it's a well-perceived risk among an informed audience. And for instance, one is clearly the generational gap and the digital literacy thing, because demand response requires some engagement with apps, with data management, etc. And as much as you can make it easy for people, and I have the impression that it's the whole project of iFLEX, it's still difficult to convince an elderly people to check on their phone, about the electricity consumption of their devices, etc. So we should also consider the needs of these target audiences in our work. And finally, skepticism is understandable. As said, people don't necessarily want to spend hours understanding how the energy system works. And then when you look at those energy suppliers who do offer dynamic prices tariffs, my colleague has done a kind of anecdotal mapping of some of the offers present on the market. Well, the least we can say is that many of them are really not very compelling. And we took an example, it's in French because it's an energy provider in Belgium, where, like it's a dynamic prices offer, but it simply says, like you could expect to save 15%, end of the story, and that's the only thing that is being transferred to consumers in terms of making the pitch. On the opposite, there are suppliers who get it right. So here we have an example from the UK and another one from this supplier, Octopus Energy, also present in the UK and different markets, which really make an effort in explaining what it is about in plain layman's terms, in saying, okay, this is what you can expect in terms of benefits. These are the risks, so to say, but this is how we address them. So it's not going to be a skyrocketing of your energy bill because you're gambling. We get this under control. And so all of this is perfectly well explained. And guess what? This is one of the most successful suppliers of dynamic prices offers because they do this consumer engagement part rather well. Then I mentioned quickly the problem of interoperability. Again, this is not something that consumers should look into, but rather policymakers, industry, etc. But there are many offers on the market which are constrained by this technical side of things. And for instance, one of the energy supplier, it was again Octopus Energy. They tell you what if you have an electric car, their offer does not work with every power station or charging box on the market. It only works with a few of them. So, it means that you need to carefully select which charging box you will need for to take advantage of the dynamic prices. It's a problem if we want to really spread dynamic tariffs, and this interoperability aspect needs to be solved, of course. And finally, I will be quick because I'm speaking for too long. I think there are risks which we also need to manage in terms of cyber attacks, in terms of data protection. And there are, if you go on the internet and look a bit for stories of smart homes which have been exposed to these vulnerabilities, there are many of them. We hear a lot about these scams, like the increase of cyber attacks, of remote control, etc. So this is really something serious, which can be a make or break confidence aspect in the transition to dynamic prices. Same with GDPR, as I was saying, like data leaks are really an issue which should be taken seriously. So to sum up, and that's my last slide, we know we have to go towards this demand-side flexibility because the transition we're into will require this. If we don't do that, this will make the whole transition costlier for everyone. So for consumers, for the economy as a whole, for the society as a whole, because we'll need to build massive grids, we'll need to, which will need to be subsidized by citizens' pockets probably, and we'll have a system where we don't take advantage of the great possibility offered by electrification. We also know that dynamic prices, if done well, can really provide benefits to people. The things to make this happen and make this attractive to people, first, make the offer available. So make sure that every member state offers dynamic prices contracts to people. People can still stay on their fixed price contract or variable price contracts, but this possibility of switching should be offered. Then there should be a nice design of this offer so that people can engage, and this means transparency. This is good information. This means also price safeguards, and then we need to also finally manage the technical side of things with interoperability and the question of new vulnerabilities connected to these digital tools. Voilà, I'll stop there, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. Very interesting. Also, the interrelation between the lack of dynamic pricing schemes compared to the lack of awareness on the consumer side of DR. So that gap between, obviously, the lack of awareness is perhaps mirrored in the lack of dynamic pricing, and how do you establish and handle all this communication between doing the the solutions and also the awareness. Very interesting. So we'll move to the Q&A session now. I will just check if there are any questions from any of our attendees.
Yeah, yes, we have a couple of questions. I'd like to pose them now. Two questions about the European level. So I think this will be for Dimitri. I can read the question as follows: what would you name as the most significant barrier of Europe-wide adoption of smaller consumers' demand response?
Well, I would say it's an implementation transposition problem first, you know. So there are things that the EU can solve, but for instance, they made, as said, 5 years ago, since this reform of electricity market meant that every consumer should be offered a dynamic price possibility. And many member states just did not implement those provisions in their national law. And that's why me in Brussels, many people around Europe just simply don't have the possibility. So what I would expect the Commission to do is to put more emphasis on this, to really push member states to finally answer their legal obligation, because it's not a pick and choose thing. They should do that. And to make maybe, you know, like, to burst a bit the technical bubble about dynamic prices. Maybe let's stop talking about demand side response and dynamic tariffs. Let's find nicer and more compelling ways, and which talk to a general audience. What is this, and why is it needed, and what the benefits will be. And as we move to the next commission after the election, I think the new commission should put a lot of emphasis of integrating this demand side flexibility in all the energy strategies that will be developed. For instance, you know, the Commission should come up with a so-called heat pump action plan to accelerate the rollout of heat pumps across Europe. Well, I would call them to put a good emphasis in this action plan on the need to also provide these dynamic prices offers.
Thank you, Dimitri. There's another question, I think, related to Europe. So maybe you, maybe also Barbara will have a word on this. So the question is, as we heard in the previous presentation, most iFLEX pilot participants did not accept or did not understand the concept of grid instability and how it could be mitigated by shifting load. Are there any actions at the EU level that will give citizens a basic awareness about the volatility of such an important infrastructure?
I can go first, and maybe Barbara and Roman will
Yes,
complement.
I think you are the right person to
Yeah.
answer this. Yes.
Yeah, well, I was about to send you the question as well. Why? Not because I don't want to respond, but I don't think that it's really like the consumer has the Commission, sorry, and the EU has a role to play. But I don't think that the European Commission is best placed in terms of outreach to citizens to explain why this switch to demand side flexibility is important for the stability of our energy system overall. This is a task which is something for the whole society, for energy providers, for policymakers at national level, for think tanks, journalists, maybe, and importantly as well for consumer groups, you know? So that's why, for instance, and I guess that's one of the key advantages of organizations like ZPS and the likes around Europe is how do we make sure that we can burst this technical bubble and explain, you know, in general terms, why the whole, like what are the key trends of this whole transition, and why we're not in the old days where, you know, like you just turn down the coal power plant or a gas power plant and this was it, you know, no one needed to think about it. Why the switch to renewables requires this kind of action. And more importantly, because there's only so much you can get by explaining the meta trends and, you know, why your individual action matters for the general transition. More importantly, to get consumer engagement, we need to tell them what is in for them, I think, you know. What is it about? What are, like, reassure people. Baba, you showed quite compelling statistics about, you know, people not being worried indeed. So how do we reassure them? And how do we make sure that those who can engage or do and extract benefits from this? I don't think that the aim should be to go overnight from, I don't know how many percentage of the population is using these dynamic tariffs, but it gets very, very little at the moment, to massive deployments in a few months or few years. But already, if we manage to convince those people who have the right conditions, meaning, you know, maybe an electric car, maybe they have already a heat pump, they have insulated their house, and they can benefit from this, and we can show what the potential financial benefits are, we will have come a long way. So maybe that's where Barbara and Roman, you can say a few words about what you're doing in Slovenia, maybe to present this.
Thank you, Dimitri.
Yes.
And funny enough, there is actually a question, the same question more or less for Slovenia. Barbara, would you like to answer this here? You mentioned that there's a lack of knowledge about the concepts energy flexibility and demand response, and that it is essential to raise awareness. How do you propose to tackle this for Slovenia? As I understand it, products for consumer based on real-time hourly pricing will soon be a reality in Slovenia.
Yes, as Dmitry mentioned before, consumer organization should or can play an important role in informing consumers about all these things we are talking about today. And regarding ZPS, we are trying to explain them all those things within different projects that we take part of, like this is, for example, it's iFLEX project, also ClearX and Clear HP projects that started last September. These are all projects that that are dealing with renewables and with educational articles and with all our activities, we are trying to persuade consumers why it is good to switch to renewables. Maybe we are a bit short in how they should do it, or how what are all the benefits, but as I said, we are trying to do this, and we also we know some changes are coming for Slovenian consumers regarding electricity. So we started a series of articles to explain them about tariffs, about all the, I don't know, Roman omrežnine, can't find a word.
Network tariffs.
Network tariffs, yes, sorry. What this will mean for consumers and how they can prepare to these changes. Maybe we should have a broader action together with other consumer organizations to be more focused on these particular changes. So this is not just I don't know, within one project, a few things about this and a few things about this, maybe to focus on this problem.
Yeah, well, you can count on us, Barbara, to continue with this conversation, because we know it's important. And maybe one last disclaimer, Louise, is we've, like I mentioned this study that we're going to publish. So we'll have an event about this on the 26th of April with quite prominent speakers from the European Commission, from energy providers, from our German member, Verbraucherzentrale Bundesverband, where we'll exactly tackle these issues. How do we make sure that people engage, and how do we make sure that we stop just talking about the potential benefits and actually start delivering them, right? But one important disclaimer is that what we found in our research is that dynamic prices, they don't necessarily make sense on all markets yet. And for instance, in Hungary, where you have heavily subsidized fixed price tariffs, people are better off staying with fixed price tariffs. However, while this is part of a broader debate whether energy should be considered a public good, and this is a legitimate discussion to have, what we can ask ourselves if it's the best use of public money, because this fixed price tariff and this subsidy, it puts a huge toll in terms of the state's budget, hence taxes, income taxes, etc. So what we can ask ourselves is whether, like this dynamic prices tariff, this flexibility would not be a better use of, the system's efficiency, and the savings made on subsidized, tariffs. The money could be reinvested in housing renovation, social tariffs for people who need it the most, purchase incentives for heat pumps or electric cars. This kind of more structural investments that will make our whole system more resilient and protect consumers, importantly. So that's also a bigger discussion we probably need to have.
There are several other questions, but I think we have more or less covered them in the previous answers that you give. And there is one single thing, if Roman, you can look at this very quickly. The question is about other than economic incentives. So what about other incentives such as independence, which is self-consumption, efficiency like smartness, environmental conservation like green electricity, and making money by investing in RIS and cell energy of storage? Could you answer a few things on this?
Yeah.
You have 1 minute.
Yeah, actually, the savings and, let's say, some monetary incentives or some benefits are actually the ones that were mostly said, but by our consumers, our pilot users. They see this as the most important one. But we asked and we checked with them also others, like it's said here, efficiency, environmental conservation, and so on. And yes, there are incentives. They are recognized by consumers, but they are on the second or third place. On the first place, actually, all the time there is some kind of monetary benefit and incentives. But yes, we are communicating and we are raising awareness also about other incentives which are important nevertheless.
So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody, speakers, participants, for this very interesting discussion that could go on forever. And it's nice to know that on the 20th April there'll be a session where we can continue the discussions. So Dimitri, make sure you send that to me. That would be very interesting to take part in. And as I mentioned, this has been recorded, this webinar, so you can revisit in case you want to look at sections you didn't had the time to think about. So thank you very much, speakers, participants, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.